The small alien girl lay curled up in the wreckage of a destroyed building, her thin body covered in dirt and bruises. Her large violet eyes barely stayed open, and her breathing was weak. She had not eaten in days. The air smelled of smoke and metal, the remains of a battle long over. She had no memory of her parents, only flashes of faces she could not recognize. She thought she would die here, alone, forgotten. Then heavy footsteps approached. Captain Elias Voss stood at the edge of the ruins, scanning the area with sharp, experienced eyes. His freighter crew had come to this planet for supplies. But instead, they found destruction. The war had left nothing but ruins, abandoned machines, and a strange silence. As he turned to leave, something caught his attention. A small, trembling form half hidden under broken metal. His heart clenched. It was a child. Kneeling, he reached out a hand. "Hey, kid, can you hear me?" The girl flinched, her body curling tighter as if expecting a blow. Her violet eyes locked onto his, filled with fear and confusion. Elias felt a surge of anger, not at her, but at whatever cruel fate had left her here. "Easy now," he said, softening his voice. "I'm not here to hurt you." Behind him, a tall woman with dark hair stepped forward. Sam Carter, his second in command. She crouched beside Elias and observed the girl carefully. "Poor thing looks half dead. She's not human, that's for sure, but she's just a kid." Elias nodded. The girl had soft, silver skin with faint glowing patterns running along her arms. Her hair was white, tangled, and dirty. Definitely not human. But that didn't matter. "We can't leave her here," Elias decided. "She won't survive another night." Sam hesitated. "We don't know anything about her. What if she's dangerous?" Elias glanced back at the girl. She was so weak she could barely lift her head. "She's not dangerous. She's just scared." Slowly, he removed his jacket and gently wrapped it around the small alien girl. "You're coming with us, kid." She didn't resist as he picked her up, too exhausted to fight. She just rested her head against his chest, her tiny body shivering. For the first time in a long while, she felt warm. Back on the ship, the girl woke up in a soft bed, surrounded by unfamiliar voices. "She hasn't said a word," said Jax, the ship's engineer. "Doesn't look like she understands us either." "She understands," Elias replied, standing beside the bed. "She just doesn't trust us yet." The girl stared at them cautiously. She had never seen creatures like them before. Tall, broad, with strange colored eyes and warm skin. They spoke in a rough, unfamiliar language, but she could sense something different about them. They were not like the ones who had hurt her before. They were kind. A plate of food was placed in front of her, steaming, fresh, and smelling wonderful. Her stomach twisted with hunger, but she hesitated. "It's okay," Elias said gently. "Go on. Eat." The girl slowly reached for the food. The first bite was small, careful, but once she tasted it, she couldn't stop. She ate quickly, her hands shaking, afraid that it would be taken away. Sam sighed. She must have been starving for days. Jax crossed his arms. "What do we even call her?" Elias thought for a moment, then looked at the girl. "How about Leary?" The girl stopped eating for a second and blinked at him. Her mouth opened slightly as if she recognized the name. "Leary," Elias repeated, smiling. "Yeah, I think it suits you." Leary. It wasn't the name she was born with, but in that moment, it became her name, the first thing she truly owned in this strange new life. Days turned into weeks, and Leary slowly adjusted to life on the freighter. At first, she barely spoke. She would flinch at loud noises, avoid eye contact, and wake up screaming from nightmares she couldn't explain. But the crew was patient. Sam taught her how to hold a wrench. Jax let her watch while he fixed the ship, and Elias was always there, watching over her like a father would. One day, while eating with the crew, Elias placed a small gadget in front of her. "Here." Fixed up an old translator. It should help you understand us better." Leary hesitated, then picked it up, pressing it against her ear. For the first time, the voices around her became clear. "Work," Sam was saying. Leary's eyes widened in surprise. I understand," she whispered, her voice rough from disuse. Everyone froze. Elias grinned. "Well, would you look at that? Our little Leary's got a voice." Leary felt something warm inside her chest, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Belonging. She still didn't know who she really was. She still had no memories of the past. But here, among these strange humans, she felt something she thought she had lost forever. A home. And for now, that was enough. Leary had lived on the freighter Silver Star for nearly a year. In that time, she had grown from a scared, silent child into a quiet but curious young girl. The humans on the ship had become her family. Captain Elias Voss, who had found her in the ruins, treated her like a daughter. Sam Carter, the strong and serious second-in-command, taught her how to fight and survive. Jax, the grumpy engineer, let her help fix the ship. She still didn't remember where she came from. And for a long time, she didn't care. But everything changed the day they stopped at Vorna Station. Vorna Station was a massive trade hub floating in deep space. It was a place where merchants, travelers, and criminals all mixed together. Bright neon lights flashed across the halls, and the air smelled of metal, oil, and strange alien spices. Leary had never seen so many different species before. Tall, thin creatures with glowing eyes. Small, furry beings with too many arms. Cold-eyed mercenaries in heavy armor. It was overwhelming, but exciting. "Stay close," Elias said, walking beside her. "This place can be dangerous." Leary nodded. She had seen enough fights to know that trouble could appear at any moment. Still, she felt safe with Elias and the crew nearby. They moved through the crowded market, stopping at different stalls. Jax argued over engine parts. Sam checked weapon supplies. Leary wandered a little, fascinated by the colorful displays. Then, everything changed in an instant. A merchant, a tall, thin alien with dark blue skin, froze the moment he saw her. His 4 black eyes widened, and his hands trembled. He dropped the small device he had been holding. "Your Highness," he whispered. Leary's heart stopped. "What?" The merchant's face went pale. He looked around quickly, fear in his eyes. Then he bent forward in a deep bow. A royal bow. "Forgive me, Princess. I did not know you had survived," he stammered. Leary stepped back, confused and afraid. I think you're mistaken." But the merchant shook his head. "The last heir of the Zyran Dominion, the lost child of the royal family. It is you." Leary couldn't breathe. Before she could ask more, the merchant panicked. "They must not know I saw you," he hissed. He grabbed his things and ran, disappearing into the crowd. Leary stood frozen, her mind spinning. Princess. Zyran Dominion. What was he talking about? Back on the ship, Leary sat in silence, staring at the metal floor. The others were talking, their voices serious. Zyran Dominion. Sam frowned. That empire fell over 100 years ago. It was wiped out in a war. No one survived. But he called her a princess. Jax said, What if she's really one of them?" Leary looked up at Elias. "Captain." Elias sighed and crouched in front of her. "Kid, we never knew where you came from. But if this is true, then you're part of something much bigger than we thought." Leary's hands clenched. "I don't care. I don't want to be a princess. I just want to stay here." Elias smiled, resting a hand on her shoulder. "You're part of this crew, Leary, no matter what." Her chest ached with relief. But deep inside, she knew the truth. She couldn't ignore this. She had to find out who she really was. That night, Leary sat alone in her small room, turning a small pendant over in her hands. The pendant had been with her since the day the crew found her. It was the only thing that had survived with her. A strange, smooth metal with glowing lines forming a symbol she didn't understand. She had never thought much about it before. But now, Leary carefully placed the pendant on her datapad, letting the ship's computer scan it. A few seconds later, the screen flickered. Unknown language DTKT. Leary's heart pounded. She pressed more buttons, adjusting the settings. The ship's AI worked through the patterns, searching through thousands of old records. Then suddenly, a match appeared. The screen displayed a royal crest, the same symbol on her pendant. Next to it, the words, Xiran Imperial Family, Classified Records, Status, Extinct. Leary's hand shook. The merchant had been right. She wasn't just some lost child. She was the last heir of an empire that no longer existed. But if the Xiran Dominion had been destroyed, who had saved her? Who had hidden her away? And if her family had been killed, why was she still alive? Leary barely slept that night. The next morning, she found Elias in the cockpit. I want to know the truth, she said firmly. I want to find out who I really am. Elias studied her face for a long time. Then he nodded. All right, kid, he said. Then let's go find your past. Leary took a deep breath. She had no idea what waited for her out there. But one thing was certain, her journey was only just beginning. Leary had always thought of the Silver Star as her home. The humans who raised her, Captain Elias, Sam, Jax, and the rest of the crew, were her family. But now, everything felt different. She wasn't just Leary, the lost alien girl. She was the last heir of the Xiran Dominion, and someone wanted her dead. Ever since the incident on Vornis Station, strange things had been happening. The first attack came just days after they left the station. A bounty hunter ship ambushed them in deep space. No warnings, no demands, just blaster fire and missiles aimed straight at their engines. Shields up, Elias roared, gripping the ship's controls as the Silver Star twisted through space, dodging enemy fire. Leary clung to the wall as the ship shook violently. Her heart pounded. Who are they? She shouted over the alarms. Sam checked the scanners. No markings, no signals. Someone hired them. Jax growled. They're not here for cargo. They're here for her. Leary felt cold fear settle in her stomach. Someone knew who she was. Someone wanted to erase the last living Xiran. But the Silver Star was a tough ship, and its crew were tougher. Sam took control of the rear cannons, firing back. Jax rerouted power to the shields, and Elias, with years of experience flying through war zones, outmaneuvered their attackers. Within minutes, the bounty hunter ship was left drifting, engines disabled. Let's get out of here, Elias said, punching the thrusters. The Silver Star jumped into hyperspace, disappearing before more enemies could arrive. Leary sat in silence, gripping the armrest of her chair. This wasn't just a mistake. This was a hunt. That night, Leary couldn't sleep. She sat in her small room, staring at her reflection in the metal mirror. Why was she being hunted? If the Xiran Dominion was destroyed long ago, then why was someone trying so hard to get rid of her? She needed answers, and there was only one place to find them. The old Xiran homeworld. The capital planet of her people had been lost for over a century. No one had traveled there in generations. Most believed it was a dead world, wiped out by war. But Leary had a feeling that if she could find it, she would find the truth. She grabbed her pendant, the only thing left from her past, and held it tightly. There had to be something hidden in it, some kind of coordinates, a clue. Taking a deep breath, she connected it to the ship's AI database, running a deep scan. The system worked for hours, analyzing the strange metal and energy signature. At first, there was nothing. Then, suddenly, a map appeared on the screen. Leary's eyes widened. It was a star chart, showing a set of hidden coordinates, a place off the grid, deep in uncharted space. Her heart pounded. This is it. She had found the lost world of the Xiran. The next morning, Leary brought the data to Elias. You really want to do this? he asked, arms crossed. Leary nodded firmly. I have to. This is my past, my people's past. I need to know the truth. Elias sighed, rubbing his face. This could be a trap, kid. Jax grunted. Of course it's a trap. Every bounty hunter in the galaxy is after her. Sam leaned back in her chair. But if we don't go, we'll never know who's behind this. Elias studied Leary for a long moment. Then, finally, he nodded. All right, let's go find your lost world. The journey took days. The Silver Star traveled through empty, forgotten space, following the hidden coordinates. As they got closer, the stars seemed darker. The air in the ship grew tense. Then, at last, they saw it. A dead planet, floating in the vastness of space, covered in thick storm clouds and crumbling ruins. The once great capital of the Zyran Dominion lay in silence, untouched for over 100 years. Leary stared out the window, her heart aching. This was my home, she whispered. Sam frowned. If it was, then what happened here? Elias guided the ship down toward the surface, landing in a massive abandoned city. Towering buildings stood in ruins, vines growing over them. The air was heavy with dust. They stepped out carefully, weapons ready. Leary felt something strange, a deep pull, like the planet itself was calling her. Then, movement. Captain, Jax whispered, we're not alone. From the shadows, figures emerge. Not soldiers, not bounty hunters, but survivors. Their clothes were torn, their faces tired, but their eyes burned with something fierce. Hope. An old Zyran man stepped forward, staring at Leary with disbelief. His voice trembled. You are alive. Leary took a step forward, her chest tight. Who are you? The man fell to his knees, bowing deeply. We are the last of the Zyran. And you are our queen. Leary's breath caught. She had spent years wondering who she was, running from her past. But now, face to face with her lost people, she realized the truth. She wasn't just a survivor. She was the last hope of the Zyran Dominion. And someone had tried to erase her. But now she would fight back. Leary's heart pounded as she stared at the kneeling elder. The other survivors behind him whispered among themselves, their eyes filled with hope and disbelief. You are our queen. The words echoed in her mind. She had spent her whole life thinking she was just a lost orphan, a forgotten child. But now, these people believed she was something much more. She swallowed hard. I don't understand. The old Zyran man lifted his head, his wrinkled face filled with emotion. Come with us, Your Highness. There is much you must see. Leary turned to Elias. He nodded, resting a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We've got your back, kid. With that, they followed the survivors deeper into the ruins of the lost Zyran capital. The underground tunnels were ancient but still intact. Blue lights flickered to life as they walked, revealing walls covered in glowing symbols, the language of the Zyran Dominion. Jax whistled. This place is still running after 100 years. The old man, who introduced himself as Elder Varys, nodded. The heart of our city still beats beneath the surface. It has been waiting. For you. Leary felt a strange pull in her chest, as if the walls, the air, even the planet itself recognized her. Finally, they'd reached a massive chamber. A towering holographic map of the old empire floated in the air. Golden lights marked the planets that once belonged to the Zyran Dominion. Most of them were dark, destroyed. Leary's throat tightened. What happened to us? Elder Varys took a deep breath. The Zyran Dominion was betrayed. The map flickered, showing a great war. Ships burned. Cities crumbled. A powerful enemy, the Cinder Coalition, had struck without warning. The Cinder feared us, Varys continued. They could not defeat us in battle, so they turned our own people against us. A traitor from within, one of our own generals, led them to our homeworld. They destroyed everything. Leary's hands clenched into fists. Then how am I still alive? Varys smiled sadly. Because your parents, the last king and queen, knew what was coming. They hid you away, sent you far beyond the reach of the cinder. They believed you would return one day. Lyri felt her legs grow weak. Elias caught her, steadying her. Easy, kid. She shook her head. I don't feel like a queen. I'm just me. Varys placed a gentle hand over his heart. A true ruler does not seek power. They seek to protect. That is why you are meant to lead. Lyri swallowed hard. She didn't know if she could believe that. But before she could respond, the ground suddenly shook. An alarm blared through the chamber. They found us. One of the survivors shouted. Lyri turned to the holographic map. A fleet of enemy ships was descending upon the planet. Her blood ran cold. The Cinder had come to finish what they started. Up on the surface, the Silver Star was already under attack. Sam and Jax fought back, using the ship's cannons to keep the enemy at bay. But there were too many. Captain, we can't hold them off forever. Sam called over the comms. Elias grabbed his blaster. Time to move. We need to get out of here. But Varys shook his head. If we run, they will hunt us forever. We must fight back. Lyri's mind raced. What could they do? Then she looked at the map again. A hidden vault was marked beneath the city, a place labeled only as the last defense. She turned to Varys. What is this? His eyes widened. The final weapon of the Zyran Dominion. Lyri took a deep breath. Take me there. They ran through the tunnels as explosions rocked the ground above them. The enemy was closing in. Finally, they reached a massive sealed door, covered in ancient markings. Varys pressed his palm to the surface. The door glowed, then slowly opened. Inside, Lyri gasped. A warship rested in the darkness. Not just any warship, a Zyran dreadnought, the last of its kind. Its sleek black surface shimmered with power. Jax let out a low whistle. Now that is a ship. Varys looked at Lyri. Only a true heir can activate it. Lyri's hands trembled as she stepped forward. The ship hummed as she approached, recognizing her presence. She placed her hand on the control panel. The ship came to life. Lights flickered on. Engines roared. Ancient weapons systems powered up. The last warship of the Zyran Dominion was ready for battle. Lyri turned to Elias and the crew. Let's show them we're not extinct yet. Elias grinned. Now that's the spirit. They hurried inside, taking their positions. The massive doors above them opened, revealing the Cinder fleet in the sky. Lyri took the pilot's seat. She had never flown a ship like this before, but somehow she knew exactly what to do. With a deep breath, she gripped the controls. The dreadnought lifted off, breaking through the ruins, rising like a phoenix from the ashes of the past. The last hope of the Zyran had returned, and she was ready to fight. The Zyran dreadnought roared to life, its massive engines shaking the ground as it ascended into the sky. The ship had been asleep for 100 years, but now it was awake and ready for war. Lyri sat in the pilot's seat, her fingers gripping the controls tightly. The ship's systems responded instantly, as if recognizing her as its true captain. Screens lit up, showing battle readiness, weapons charging, and shields activating. Elias stood behind her, watching the enemy ships above. All right, kid. Let's see what this thing can do. Lyri took a deep breath. Hold on. With a flick of her wrist, the dreadnought blasted forward, shooting into the sky like a comet. The Cinder fleet was waiting. 3 enemy warships hovered above the ruins, their weapons locking on to the dreadnought. Smaller fighter ships swarmed around them, moving like a deadly storm. A deep voice echoed over the ship's comms. Zyran vessel, surrender immediately. There is no escape. Lyri's eyes narrowed. I'm done running. She pushed the thrusters, sending the dreadnought straight into the enemy fleet. The battle had begun. Sam and Jax rushed to the weapons control room. Activating plasma turrets. Sam shouted, her hands flying over the control panel. Jax grinned. Let's see how they like this. The dreadnought's cannons came to life, firing powerful energy blasts at the Cinder fighters. Explosions lit up the sky as enemy ships were struck, their hulls breaking apart. The Cinder warships returned fire, sending a wave of missiles toward the dreadnought. Incoming, Elias warned. Leary reacted instantly, pulling the controls hard to the side. The massive ship moved faster than expected, dodging the missiles by inches. Sam smirked. Not bad, Princess. Leary rolled her eyes. Less talking, more shooting. The battle raged on. One of the Cinder warships broke formation, moving to flank them. Elias saw it first. They're trying to box us in. Leary's mind raced. She needed to turn the battle around. She glanced at the ship's control panel, and then she saw it. A hidden weapon system. She tapped the screen. The ship responded with a deep hum, energy building inside. Activating Zyran core cannon. Jax's eyes widened. That sounds important. Elder Varys, who had joined them on the bridge, nodded. It is. It was our Empire's greatest weapon. Leary's pulse quickened. She locked onto the largest enemy warship and pressed the activation button. The ship's core glowed bright blue, sending out a massive surge of energy. A beam of pure Zyran power erupted from the dreadnought, piercing straight through the Cinder warship. For a moment, the enemy ship just hovered there, its hull cracking apart. Then, boom! The warship exploded in a fiery blast, sending debris flying. The battlefield fell silent. For the first time in a century, the Zyran had won a battle. But the fight wasn't over yet. The remaining Cinder warships hesitated. They had just seen an ancient ship destroy one of their best vessels in seconds. Then the Cinder commander spoke again. His voice was cold. Retreating is not an option. Destroy them all. The two remaining warships began charging their main cannons. If those blasts hit, the dreadnought wouldn't survive. Leary clenched her jaw. We need to end this. Now. She turned to Elias. Can you handle the fighters? Elias smirked. Leave them to us. Leary focused on the warships. The Zyran dreadnought had one last trick left, a hyperspeed maneuver built for surprise attacks. She activated it. The dreadnought vanished in a blur of motion, moving faster than the enemy could track. It reappeared behind the Cinder warships in an instant. Leary didn't hesitate. She fired everything. Plasma cannons, missile launchers, the Zyran core cannon. The Cinder warships never stood a chance. Within moments, both enemy vessels erupted into flames, breaking apart in the sky. The battle was over. The remaining Cinder fighters fled, their fleet shattered. Elias leaned back, breathing hard. We actually did it. Jax laughed. Not bad for an old ship. Sam punched Leary's shoulder playfully. Not bad for a queen either. Leary smiled, but her heart was still heavy. The war wasn't over. The Cinder would come back, with even more power. She turned to Elder Varys. How many of our people are still out there? Varys' expression was serious. More than you think. If they know their queen has returned, they will rise. Leary took a deep breath. For the first time, she wasn't just a lost girl anymore. She was the last hope of the Zyran Dominion, and she was ready to fight for her people. The battlefield was silent now, the Cinder warships reduced to burning wreckage in the sky. The Zyran dreadnought hovered above the ruins of its lost world, victorious but scared. Leary sat in the pilot's seat, staring at the stars beyond. The battle was won, but she knew this was only the beginning. Elias patted her shoulder. Not bad, kid. You handled that ship like a pro. Jax leaned back in his seat, smirking. Yeah, and blew up 3 warships while she was at it. I think that makes her a real queen now. Leary shook her head. I'm not a queen yet. Not until I save my people. Elder Varys nodded. Then it is time to awaken them. Leary turned to him. How? Varys took a deep breath. There is one last message, hidden in this ship. He walked over to the control panel, placing his palm on a small glowing pad. The ship hummed, recognizing his touch. A hologram flickered to life. The room fell silent. A tall Zarin man appeared in the air, his dark robes marked with golden insignias. His eyes were the same shade of blue as Lyri's. Lyri's breath caught in her throat. "Is that?" Varys nodded. "Your father, the last king." The hologram of King Valen spoke, his voice calm yet strong. "To the one who finds this message, if you are my daughter, know that we never stopped fighting for you." Lyri swallowed hard. "Our people were betrayed, our world destroyed, but we are not gone. Our survivors are scattered, hiding in the shadows. They wait for a leader to bring them home. If you are seeing this, my child, then the time has come." The hologram's gaze seemed to look directly at her. "Find them, unite them, and take back what is ours." The message ended, and the hologram faded. Silence filled the cockpit. Lyri closed her eyes, trying to control the storm of emotions inside her. She had spent her whole life believing she was nobody. Now she knew the truth. She was the daughter of a fallen king, the last hope of a lost empire. And she had a mission. She took a deep breath and turned to the crew. "We're going to find them. Every last one of them." Elias grinned. "Then let's get started." The hunt for the survivors. Their first stop was the Outcast Belt, a dangerous region filled with broken planets, asteroid fields, and lawless space stations. It was the perfect hiding place for Zarin refugees. Lyri guided the dreadnought through the asteroid field, avoiding debris as she scanned for signals. "I'm picking up a distress beacon," Sam reported. Lyri's heart skipped a beat. "Can you track it?" Sam nodded. "It's coming from an old mining station on the edge of the belt." Jax cracked his knuckles. "Let's pay them a visit." The mining station was in bad shape. Rust covered the metal walls, and dim lights flickered in the hallways. The air was thick with tension. Lyri and Elias led the way, their hands resting on their weapons just in case. As they entered the main chamber, dozens of alien refugees turned to stare at them. Then, an old Zarin woman stepped forward. Her eyes widened as she looked at Lyri. It cannot be." Lyri took a deep breath. "I am Lyri Valen, daughter of King Valen. I have come to bring you home." A stunned silence filled the room. Then, one by one, the Zarin survivors fell to their knees, their hands over their hearts in a sign of respect. "Our queen has returned." Lyri's chest tightened. This wasn't just a mission anymore. It was a rebirth, a rising army. Over the next few days, the crew traveled from one hidden refuge to another. They found Zarin warriors hiding on abandoned moons. They found Zarin scientists building secret technology in deep space stations. They found Zarin families living in fear, waiting for hope. And when they saw Lyri, when they heard her name, their hope was reborn. The Zarin people had waited for a century. Now, they were ready to fight. The Cinder returned, but just as their army began to rise, disaster struck. A Cinder warship appeared in orbit over their latest refuge. The enemy had discovered them. Alarms blared across the camp. "They're coming," Jax shouted. Lyri's eyes burned with determination. She turned to her people. "No more hiding. No more running. We fight." The Zarin warriors raised their weapons. The dreadnought's engines roared to life. The final battle was coming, and this time, the Zarin would not fall. The sky burned with the glow of incoming Cinder warships. Their sleek black vessels descended like shadows, ready to crush the Zarin survivors before they could rise again. Lyri stood at the center of the battlefield, her heart pounding. Around her, her people prepared for war. Zarin warriors armed themselves. Pilots rushed to old fighters, and engineers worked frantically to power up the defenses. Elias placed a hand on her shoulder. "This is it, kid. No turning back now." Lyri took a deep breath. No turning back. She turned to her people. For 100 years, we have lived in fear. We have run, we have hidden, but no more. Today we stand together. Today, we take back our future. A thunderous cheer rose from the crowd. The battle for the Xiren had begun. The first strike. The Sindar warships opened fire, sending a barrage of energy blasts toward the camp. But the Xiren were ready. Leary had ordered shield generators to be activated, and the force field flickered to life, blocking the first wave of attacks. "Shields holding," Sam reported, her fingers flying over the control panel. Elias grinned. "Time to hit back." Jax, already at the turret controls, fired a volley of plasma blasts. The shot struck a Cinder dropship, causing it to explode in a fiery blast. Xiren fighters soared into the sky, engaging the enemy in high-speed combat. Blue energ, I-beams, and red laser fire clashed in the darkness of space. Leary turned to Elder Varys. "We need to disable their command ship. If we take it out, the rest will fall apart." Varys nodded. "Then we strike at the heart." Leary rushed to the Xiren dreadnought, ready for the final battle. Boarding the enemy flagship, the Cinder command ship hovered above the battlefield, its cannons firing down on the Xiren forces. It was the source of the enemy's strength. If they could take it down, the battle would be over. Leary and her team launched a daring assault. Using the dreadnought's stealth maneuver, they slipped past the enemy defenses and landed directly inside the Cinder flagship. The ship's hulls were dark and metallic, glowing with red emergency lights. Elias gripped his rifle. "Nice and quiet, just how I like it." Jack smirked. "That won't last long." As if on cue, Cinder soldiers appeared, weapons raised. Blaster fire erupted. Leary and her team took cover, returning fire with precision. The battle inside the ship was just as fierce as the one outside. Step by step, they fought their way to the command bridge. The doors slid open, and there stood the Cinder General. The final confrontation. The Cinder General was tall, armored in black and silver, his red eyes glowing with anger. "You should not exist," he growled at Leary. "The Xiren were wiped out. You are nothing but a ghost." Leary stepped forward, unafraid. "Then why are you so afraid of me?" The general's expression darkened. "Because ghosts should not rise." He lunged. The fight was fast and brutal. The general was powerful, but Leary was faster. She dodged his attacks, countering with precise strikes. But he was relentless. A heavy punch sent her crashing to the ground. Elias and Jax tried to help, but the general raised his hand, and a shockwave of energy sent them flying. Leary gasped for air, struggling to rise. The general loomed over her, his weapon glowing with deadly power. "It ends here, child." Leary's hand tightened around her weapon. "No, it begins here." Summoning every ounce of strength, she drove her blade forward, straight into the general's chest. His eyes widened. For a moment, the room was silent. Then, he collapsed. The Cinder command ship trembled, alarms blaring. Sam's voice crackled over the comm. "Leary, their fleet is breaking apart. The Cinder are retreating." The battle was won. A new dawn. Leary stood at the ruins of the battlefield, watching the Cinder ships flee into the void. The Xiren survivors gathered around her, their faces filled with hope. Elder Varys stepped forward. "You have done what no one else could. You have brought our people back from the ashes." Leary looked at the faces of those she had saved. She had spent her whole life feeling lost, alone, without a purpose. Now, she knew the truth. She was Leary Valen, the last princess of the Xiren, and the first queen of a new empire. She turned to her people, her voice strong. "We will rebuild. We will rise. The Xiren will never be forgotten again." A cheer erupted, echoing through the ruins. The Xiren Empire was reborn, and its new queen was ready to lead.